sir, but I've just completed the research on this list, and I've found something rather disturbing.
What is it?
It seems these are surgical supplies used in an allograft procedure.
Oh, no.
What is it?
It's the medical term for an organ transplant.
What?
I think you'd better hurry.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and today I am joined by a returning guest to discuss Batman and Mr. Freeze, SubZero, and that is Eoin Smith. Eoin, how you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. I'm great. How are you?
Not doing too bad. It's a little bit chilly out here. We're recording this in about mid-December, so the weather is finally cooled down here, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on if you remember how hot it was before. Uh, Before we get started on too much stuff, why don't you remind people who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Ian. I am an author. I kind of write short stories, and I'm also a magician. I am part of, at the moment, a show called Four Magicians, that we're touring around Scotland. That is getting some nice reviews. It's something a bit different because I think people haven't seen four magicians on stage together often. A lot of people haven't even seen one magician live. They tend to see it on TV. So. Yeah, it's really fun. And also just a massive superhero nerd.
Well, you're definitely in the right place for that. So what kind of stuff has been grabbing your interest lately? Does not actually have to be superhero related, but just anything at all.
I think, judging by the time that we are recording this, it has to be the first part of Stranger Things season 5. I devoured that in a day and absolutely loved it. Stranger Things for me has been just, yeah, one of my all-time favorite TV shows. I know it's got its flaws, but for me, I can overlook them because it really harks back to that awesome 80s Amblin sort of vibe of filmmaking, and I love the story, and I'm really excited to see where it all ends. I'm really frustrated that they're making me wait to see where it all ends. But yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I had that same frustration with Netflix when they were doing Cobra Kai and they split up that last season apart across I think. So I definitely feel you there. I did not jump so much on the Stranger Things bandwagon actually. I saw the first season back when it first came out and I did really enjoy it. But by the time the second season came out, I think I was just too busy with other stuff and I just wasn't able to find the time to get into it, and then just time kept passing and passing and passing, and I just was never able to get back into it. My wife, she does like it though. She devoured like, so when she was pregnant, I think with our daughter, our first kid, so that would have been around like 2020. She was having trouble sleeping at night, so she was staying up late a lot, and she just like binged all of Stranger Things, and she absolutely loved it. And so like every time there's a new season that comes out, she watches it like right away. I don't know if she's seen the latest one yet though, but she was, at least for a time, like keeping pretty regular with it. And it's one of those things that I think at this point now, so much time has passed that I'm just gonna wait until it's all finished and then I'm just gonna watch it all the way through.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm gonna, obviously I'm watching it in real time as it comes out, and then I'm gonna wait like a month, and then I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna start from the start and just watch it all in a one, because I love it so much. I wanna just keep watching it. It's one of those. I would say there's not many shows that I return to and rewatch, in the same way that I would like a favorite film. I'll watch that loads. A series, I don't tend to return to them as much just because of the time commitment. But Stranger Things is one of those ones that I think I will always go back to and always rewatch.
There's some I have that I'll go back to. Like I've gone back to Scrubs a few times and I've watched that all the way through. How I Met Your Mother, I've done that. Like I think two or three times I've gone back to that all the way through. And there's other stuff that I'll watch like different parts of here and there. Like for example, I mean Simpsons is obviously the go-to example for that, but also Batman the Animated Series, just because those are all
Yeah.
standalone episodes. So if you ever just kind of feel like I just want to watch like one thing, then you just pick like any random episode out of them because they're all pretty much standalone there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I agree with that.
for my part, I've just been swamped lately with stuff between work and the podcast and preparing for stuff for my classes. So far, everything I've been consuming lately has just been stuff to talk about on these shows or to talk about in my classes. So I've like not had time to really kind of sit down and watch something or read something that was purely just for me. The thing that I came closest to, which I kind of dipped out of to because I had to focus on switching back to reading stuff for the podcast, is Batman the Cape. I think it's the Cape Crusader collections, and the one I'm on now, I can't remember exactly which volume it is, but it has the year three storyline in it, and that's with Marv Wolfman, and that was after Jason Todd's death in the comic books. Batman was becoming much more isolated, and Dick Grayson was trying to figure out like how to reach out to him, but also flashing back to Dick's time as Robin when he first became Robin. And it was really interesting going back and reading that story because this is the first time I've read it all the way through, or at all actually. And but they did kind of soft adapt that in Batman the Animated Series as the Robin's Reckoning two-parter. So as I'm going back and I'm reading through it, I'm like, oh yeah, that was in the animated series, that was in the animated series, that was in the animated series. So it's really cool to go back to these old Bronze Age Batman comics from the 70s and the 80s, and you really see like just how much influence they really had on that animated series back then.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds really cool. That's not a series that I've read, but I definitely like the sound of that.
It is really cool. Yeah, it's in the so DC's been putting out these like premium collections of older Batman comics from like the most I think it's pretty much all from the Bronze Age. So there's the Dark Knight Detective and there's also the Caped Crusader, and I don't know why they're splitting them up. I'm not sure if they're collecting all of Detective Comics in one and all of Batman in the other or what is. I think it's actually a mix of them. But whatever the case is, they've been putting those out for a while now, and I think they also go into the 90s as well, to at least to some degree. I think it's
Hmm.
pretty much meant to like kind of fill in the gap from year one up until Nightfall is my guess is what they're probably doing with those. So it's been really interesting to go back and to go and read those for the first time and just see like how much influence that stuff had on so much Batman media that I'm already familiar with.
Nice.
And that actually does lead into today's topic because, as I mentioned at the top, we are talking about Batman and Mr. Freeze, Sub-Zero. So, this was the second animated film based on Batman the Animated Series. This one came out in 1998. First one being, of course, Mask of the Phantasm, which I still maintain greatest Batman film ever made, Batman Mask of the Phantasm. And this one was actually planned. It was actually planned to do two things. First off, it kind of bridges the gap between Batman the Animated Series, which had ended by this point and was because it originally ended on the Fox Kids network, but it was being dropped from Fox Kids, and the new Batman Adventures, when they had retooled the show for Kids WB, that was going to be coming out soon, and this was going to be kind of like a fill in the gap a little bit between those two series. And also, it was meant to be a tie in to Batman and Robin, which came out in 1997. Although they had actually ended up withholding the film and delaying it for about a year because of the bad reception to Batman and Robin. So, just like in Batman and Robin, you have Mr. Freeze as the villain here, and you also have Batgirl as and Robin serving in significant roles in it. So, what was kind of your history with this movie?
So I think this is the first superhero film that I remember watching. Um, I've got early memories of watching reruns of the 60s Batman TV series. This is the first, and also Batman the animated series. Stuff like Spider-Man, stuff like X-Men. I remember watching when I was a kid. This is the first film, the first movie that I remember watching. What I found really interesting was when I rewatched it, I didn't remember much of it. Because I was quite young when it came out. So in 98, I was 7. So like it, I remembered little bits of it. I vividly remembered the opening. I didn't really remember much of the actual film, but it's like the VHS box art is burned into my memory as like you watched this as a child. Um, so it was really cool to revisit it and kind of revisit something that I had vague memories of, and I couldn't remember if it was like, is this is this something that I just remember liking because I was a kid, or is this something that's actually going to hold up? And the last time I was on this podcast, we talked about the ill-fated Fantastic Four movie, and that is, widely agreed as rubbish. And it was really nice to be coming back to this and watching the film, going, it's actually really good. I really like this, and to be coming back and talking more about good points rather than bad points.
Yeah, I remember so 97, 98. So I was probably about so I was pretty sure I was in junior high. No, I think this was like right before I went to high school. So I'd already like you started comparatively late to me because I think my superhero film was probably Superman the movie at some point before I was 5. I'm pretty sure about that because I do there's like I also had that I do have very clear memories from my childhood of like the scene when Lois is getting like buried in the car and all that kind of stuff and
Mm.
watching the tape so much that the damn tape actually broke. Um and of course, and I think, and I never saw Batman 89 in the theater, but I did see it. We got it on VHS. Had to have been fairly soon after its release. So probably by 1990, I was watching Batman 89. And it was the kind of thing, I think, where I don't know if this was the case with your parents, since you're kind of in the later end of the millennial generation. Also, you're from the UK. But for me and in America in the 80s, and up until the early 90s at least, parents did do a whole lot of media monitoring back then. So I mean, fairly recently, for example, I think I mentioned this on the pod, but I had taught RoboCop in one of my classes, and that was a movie I saw way too young. And it was just one of those things where it's like my mom probably thought, she's like, oh, RoboCop, yeah, that's a cartoon, and this seems like a silly robot movie. Okay, you can watch that, and then wouldn't watch it with me. I think she had kind of the same thing with Batman 89 because I think her attitude was, oh yeah, Batman, that was that really campy TV show from the 60s. Yeah, that should be okay for a 5-year-old. Okay. Go ahead and watch that. And yeah, I don't think she really realized what was in these things. The clearest memory I have of my mom actually policing something we were watching is we had like the whole family was like watching a movie and it was Pretty Woman and my mom had no idea what was happening in it at first. And then when you get to the scene where Julia Roberts starts taking her clothes off, my mom's like, "Okay, it's time for us to go home now." And I remember the in the car on the way home, I was asking my mom, like, "Hey, mom, how come? Why is the movie called Pretty Woman?" And I had like kind of a vague idea of what was happening in it. And she's like, "Well, because she's pretty. Don't you think she's pretty? Isn't she pretty?" Uh, but I don't know. Did you have that kind of thing with your parents and media monitoring and that kind of stuff?
Um, I don't really remember. There's nothing that sticks out in my mind. I know in terms of like the superhero stuff, I remember like my parents are or my dad certainly is, he grew up reading comics himself. It's because of him that I'm interested in comics and interested in superheroes. So, um, yeah, I remember just kind of yeah, we were watching all that kind of stuff together. And I remember like probably being I mean, it's not massively scary, really, but probably at the time it was getting, being allowed to stay up late and watch Gremlins, when it was on TV and stuff, which probably at the age I was, probably was quite scary. But great, and I was like, oh, I love this. This is cool. So, um, my dad's a big horror film enthusiast as well. So I was probably shown. Not nothing that's particularly gory, but I have a really early memory of watching The Fog, uh, and things like The Thing. and like probably slightly too young. So I maybe slightly the opposite experience where I was probably being shown things. My dad was like, "This is a cool film," uh, but yeah, yeah. I don't really remember that kind of policing of stuff, but it was maybe happening without my knowledge.
My brother had that happen with him where he was being shown stuff because our grandmother, um, and she was living in a separate area when I was born. So, but when he was growing up, they were living like close by, or she'd come over to visit and whatnot. And she used to like wake him up in the middle of the night. She's like, "Come on downstairs," and they'd like watch old horror movies together and stuff like that. She's like giving him candy. Um,
That's what grandmothers are for.
yeah, exactly, right. So I actually don't remember the first time I saw this movie. Um, it may not have actually been until years after that I saw this movie. And I had I remember when Mr. Freeze popped up in the new Batman Adventures, and he had a very dramatic change from that was one of the things
Yeah.
that stood out to me. I think by and large, I think Batman the Animated Series is definitely the stronger of the two. But the new Batman Adventures had, especially when it came to like design work and stuff like that. But I think the new Batman Adventures had a few things. Like I liked the all black cape and gloves that Batman was wearing instead, and the silhouette bat symbol. Um, I like that they had graduated Dick Grayson to Nightwing in that, and the Mister Freeze design was also really cool because he had gotten a lot more intense, a lot scarier. Um, and the episode that he was in, I think it was Cold Comfort, if I'm remembering correctly. It's one of the standouts of that series. And one of the things they mentioned in there is that his wife had been revived, and then she had remarried someone else. And then now Freeze was basically kind of like on a quest for revenge, like a kind of like if I can't be happy, then no one can. So he was going around and just taking things away from people. So and he was targeting people based on that. And I remember that being a really strong, really intense episode. But I didn't realize that that stuff had happened in SubZero. And the first time I saw it, I think I remember being a little bit disappointed. I don't feel like it really kind of met up to my expectations of what I expected from Batman the Animated Series. And even as I'm watching it last night, like I enjoyed it. It's a solid movie. I'm not going to say otherwise, but it doesn't hit this. It doesn't compare to Mask of the Phantasm, and I think that uh, not even Return of the Joker. I think Return of the Joker, the Batman Beyond one, is also a stronger one. I mean, I put this on par with Mystery of the Batwoman, but I think and for different reasons. Like one of the things holding back Mystery of the Batwoman is I don't know if you saw that one, but that was where Bruce Timm started to lean into his weird Bruce Wayne and Barbara Gordon shipping thing, and they had become like in a relationship, and he was like, you know, leading her on. It was just really really creepy. But they handled the mystery aspect of who the Batwoman was in that very well. Whereas this, it's solid, but it's also Bruce Timm wasn't involved in this at all, and it just
Yeah.
kind of feels like I don't know, perfunctory, I guess is the best word I'd say. Like, it just feels like they were just trying to do this as a cash grab to tie into the Batman and Robin film, and that does seem what the intent of it was actually. What are some things you thought about when you were rewatching it?
So yeah, I would agree that it doesn't reach the heights of Mask of the Phantasm. Um, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I was doing a bit of like background research on it. So, what was interesting is that episode of the new Batman Adventures, this was obviously originally supposed to bridge that gap, but because it was delayed, I believe that it was actually this film was released after that. So because although it was meant to kind of bridge that continuity, because they delayed the release of it, it kind of ended up screwing it up, which was quite interesting. And also, this wasn't the original going to be the original plot for this film, from what I've read online. So, basically, when it was first written, they knew that Bane was going to be in the film, and they had written a storyline that was like Bane as this apparent, I'm gonna read this out here, an unstoppable Terminator-like villain, along with a subplot exploring Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon's romance. So that second point of the romance kind of sort of stays in it, but it's a very minor subplot. But basically, in the middle of they basically wrote the plot, and then it was like, oh, by the way, we've hired Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's going to play Mr. Freeze. You've got to make him the villain. And apparently the executives were basically like, well, just like do like a control F and swap Mr. Freeze and Bane. And the creative team were like, no, we can't do that. We're going to actually write a new film. So I think that the writing of it was maybe slightly rushed. But I mean, for me, despite that, I thought it held up pretty well. I think you could see some, there's some interesting stuff in there. I've always preferred Mr. Freeze as kind of a sympathetic character rather than just an out and out villain. I've always found that having Nora as his motivation is way more interesting to me than any stories where he's just like, oh, I need some money, or like the film, well, I know Nora's the kind of the influence in Batman and Robin, but it is very much like, hey, Arnold Schwarzenegger's here and he's going to make some terrible puns. So when it's that kind of sympathetic side, so for me it kind of worked because Mr. Freeze was in this, and I never felt he was a true villain throughout it, and that for me was interesting. Which I think is reflected in the title, the fact that it's Batman and Mr. Freeze and not Batman versus Mr. Freeze. It reminds me of Zack Snyder really going hard on why it was Batman v Superman and not Batman versus Superman, because it wasn't a true rivalry, which I always thought was pretty weak. But this, when you've actually got and rather than versus, I thought was really interesting, because you very rarely get the name of a villain in the title of the film, and the fact that it's not Batman versus, it's Batman and, it kind of set it up as an interesting kind of two-hander for me.
Yeah, that the V in there was always so weird. I'm like, that's what they do. Is Batman taking Superman to court? What are you doing here? Which honestly probably would have been a better film than what we got.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I think that is interesting. The title always kind of stuck out to me as well, the Batman and Mr. Freeze thing. And I always thought it was interesting that they didn't just call it Batman Sub-Zero or Batman like slash Mr. Freeze or something like that, but instead it was
yeah,
Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero. Um, so and yeah, I think he is a sympathetic character in this. This might be his most sympathetic, especially in the beginning when you see
yeah,
him with the kid and bringing him the food and everything, and you find out later that Freeze had rescued this kid and was taking care of him and protecting him. So all that stuff was very interesting, especially too at the end when he sees that Nora's still alive, that she's been revived, and he's happy even though he knows he can't be with her. Again, that was a really sweet little moment, which is also kind of undercut. As much as I like Cold Comfort, it is also undercut by his behavior in that episode as well.
yeah,
But also there's another thing that whole thing with Bane is really interesting, and I think I kind of want to see that movie
yeah,
because Bane in the animated series was not really taken seriously. That was because Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, they didn't really think much of Bane as a character. They didn't think he was very interesting. They thought he was kind of just like a gimmick character for the Nightfall storylines. They didn't have a lot of so they just treated him and that's why he was just basically hired muscle when you see him in his appearances there, and doesn't really have a whole lot to offer. But if they had done a movie that was focused on Bane, and I think it would have been really interesting to see how that would have turned out and what they would have done with that. um Another thing that was cut is there was supposed to be Joker and Harley Quinn were supposed to appear in this as well, and they were supposed to team up with Mr. Freeze to kill Batman, but all their scenes were cut, and I'm not sure where those scenes would have gone in. And we know they were actually those scenes were created. I don't know if they were animated, but they were recorded. Mark Hamill and Arlene Sorkin recorded all their lines for those scenes. So I have a trouble figuring out where in the movie those scenes would have gone because I didn't feel as even though I said like I was a little bit disappointed in this compared to some of the other animated stuff, it doesn't feel like there's anything missing from this movie.
No, absolutely not. It kind of it feels like a rounded out story. It feels like it hits the beats that it needs to hit, and that's maybe why it was removed. It's maybe it was just kind of in there, kind of crowbarred in again for that cash grab kind of thing, and potentially we benefited at that point where they kind of said, actually, it's not worth just kind of crowbarring them in just to say that we've got Hamill's Joker in there.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. That's exactly what I was going to say too. And I feel like as much as I like Mask of the Phantasm, I don't feel like Joker really adds a whole lot to that movie with his appearances in it, and you didn't really need him in there. You could have just stuck with just the Phantasm aspect of it. Um, you also had a new actress for Batgirl in this. So Mary Kay Bergman came on for this movie and only this movie. She replaced Melissa Gilbert, who voiced Batgirl in Batman the Animated Series, and then Tara Strong ended up voicing her in the new Batman Adventures. But I didn't really notice too much of a difference between the three performances. In fact, all this time I thought it was the same actress all the way through, so I didn't really, I didn't really notice anything about those differences.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's definite continuity there between the actresses. I would be the same. I I haven't gone back and rewatched the animated series for a while. So yeah, for me it was kind of yeah, I didn't really realize that it was someone different.
There was also another thing that one of the things that Bruce Timm was annoyed by about this movie was actually that idea of reviving Nora because he
Mm,
he said in his mind actually she was completely dead, not preserved in ice. It's just she was dead and Mr. Freeze was just kind of deluding himself. Um and one of the things he wanted to do was to in the new Batman Adventures, he had wanted to adapt one of the comic book stories that was based on the animated series. And they did this once with the Harley Quinn story, Mad Love. They eventually adapted into the new Batman Adventures. But there was another one um, in a Batman 1994 holiday special comic. And most of those ended up in the Holiday Nights episode of the new Batman Adventures. But there was one Mr. Freeze story by Mike Mignola, and he had wanted to use that. He wanted to adapt that in there, but you couldn't do it because in the story, like one of the key points is Nora Freeze is dead in that story. And with her being
mm,
revived at the end of this, you couldn't have done it that way.
yeah.
What were some other things
Yeah.
that kind of jumped out at to you when you were rewatching this?
I think that um I enjoyed that um Barbara holds her own. I know she gets kidnapped, and I know that, but it's very easy, even when you've got. I find that sort of era, a female superhero could still easily become a damsel in distress. And I know she gets kidnapped, and I know ultimately Batman and Robin kind of swoop in and save her, but there's a lot of kind of good, um, kind of action of her kind of escaping through ceiling ducts and all sorts of actually holding her own against Mr. Freeze and the Doctor. It's his name, Belson, I think.
Belson, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that for me was good because Batgirl is a great character, and I hate when you kind of watch something and they kind of reduce a character that is, a compelling character into being damsel in distress or kind of one note. But it was good that I found that that was kind of preserved, and that she was it was, again, although she wasn't in the Batgirl costume a whole lot in the film, um, it was good that it kind of felt like she had a starring role in it as well.
Yeah, this was definitely one of her better showings, especially when it comes to the animated movies. I mean, this is probably, I mean, slim pickings for those, unfortunately,
Yeah.
because you had the Killing Joke, which, whoo boy,
Well,
and
yeah.
yeah, and in Return of the Joker, she was very much just kind of like a supporting character. She didn't have a whole lot to do in that, and there's another one too that I'm. Oh, and then also, yeah, Mystery of the Batwoman, of course, where obviously she is, just completely written off and she's just treated terribly in that. So it was nice to see her in this and to have some agency. And even though she is, there is somewhat of a damselly aspect to it, they do give her agency, whereas it's not like Freeze actually tries to reason with her, and but they're lying to her, telling her that they need her help for a blood transfusion to save Nora. Um, but then when she figures out what's really going on, then she gets the help of Kunak to escape, and she gets herself out. I guess one of the things that I wish that had happened here is that we would have seen, because we go from this to the New Batman Adventures where everybody knows each other's identity and they're all working together now. And I know they did it in a flashback episode, I think, where they revealed that Bruce revealed his identity to Barbara. But I feel like this would have been a good place to kind of start setting the groundwork, at least for that. But none of that really happens in this. And I guess part of it is because Bruce Timm wasn't involved, so they didn't want to step on his toes. Or I'm not sure exactly. Um, the other
Yeah,
thing I
that's
liked,
one thing I couldn't remember if everyone knew who each other was at this point, because as I say, it's been a while since I've watched the animated series. So because there's at one point where she's like, throw me a line, and he just like, fires a grappling hook and she kind of slides down it, and I'm like, would he have just done that? Like, it felt like there was like he knew who she was, therefore she was just like saying to a colleague, throw me this thing and I'll come down. So that for me, that's interesting that it was before that point.
yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, there was an episode at some point in the New Batman Adventures where there's some flashback. I think it's the one where uh Nightwing explains to Robin like his history and how him and Batman fell out.
Okay.
And in that, I think it's revealed that in the midst of them having trouble, like Bruce had revealed himself to Barbara, and when he had revealed himself to Barbara, he'd also obviously revealed Dick, and Dick was kind of mad that he had taken that choice out of his hands. If I think I'm going back on, like, guys, I'm trying to remember something that I saw last, like, at least 10 years ago, probably, if not more. So my memory is probably wrong on this. Um, but and then one of the things that I'm pretty sure happened in there is when Batman revealed his identity. Like, I think Batgirl was about to reveal hers or something like that, and then Batman's like, "Oh, I already know you're Batgirl." And so yeah, so I think it could very well be that at this point he knew who she was already. Um,
Yeah.
but we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about this movie. Blast off into a new universe with Corsairs, a new sci-fi space opera serial by me, Percival Constantine. In these adventures, join the crew of the Corsair, a group of intergalactic mercenaries, as they struggle to survive in the depths of corporate-controlled space. If you're a fan of Firefly, Cowboy Bebop, or Guardians of the Galaxy, then you're going to love Corsairs. Subscribers to my Patreon get 2 new episodes a week, while free members get 1 new episode a week starting in December. Patreon offers new subscribers a 7-day free trial, but I'm also throwing in another perk. If you sign up with the coupon code SCP, you'll get 90% off your first month. So visit patreon.com/Percival Constantine and join in the adventures. We all love superhero movies and TV shows, but what about the comics that inspired them? Marvel, DC, Image, and more have provided the template for the movies and shows we all enjoy watching, and it's important to honor that tradition by buying and reading comic books. Superhero Cinephiles is proud to be an affiliate of mycomicshop.com. It began as a small mail-order business operated by junior high school student Buddy Saunders all the way back in 1960 and has been operating on the internet since 1997. My comic shop has new releases, value packs, back issues, trade paperbacks, comic art, regular auctions, and a whole lot more, including 35% discounts on pre-orders. You can also sell your own comics or utilize their consignment services. You can even create your own want list of comics you're searching for. To get started, check out our affiliate link in the show notes or on the superherocinephiles.com homepage. And we are back, still talking about Batman and Mr. Freeze, SubZero. One of the things that I also liked about this is the expansion of the Dick and Barbara relationship, because it had been kind of teased a little bit in Batman the Animated Series, but they didn't really go too much into depth in it. And by the time we get into the new Batman Adventures, I think it was pretty much done with by that point. And they'd had like a past, but it wasn't like anything that was addressed. Here we start to see some stuff actually happening. And first off, I do like that, Barbara actually seems to care a lot about Dick, and she seems more interested in him than Bruce, which is what Tim would later force it. But it felt very natural. But also she takes ownership of her femininity and her sexuality, like not overtly, but she's very much like in the driver's seat of the relationship, and I really like that aspect of her character in this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good. It just adds a little bit more interest, a little bit more depth to the story. There's one element of that that I didn't like, and that is the way that Commissioner Gordon um acts. I think he's a bit creepy. He sounds he's kind of there's the scene near the top of the movie where Bruce and Dick arrive at this kind of function, and they meet Commissioner Gordon, and Commissioner Gordon's talking to Dick about like, oh, Barbara's got plenty of other suitors, but don't worry, you're the top of the list. And then when Barbara arrives, and then goes off with Dick, I think Commissioner Gordon says something like, "Oh, he's a very lucky guy." And I was like, "Oh, that just there's something about that just the way that the line was delivered was just sounded a little bit creepy."
He
Um,
also he also says when she appears at that function in the dress and everything, he looks at her and he's like, "Wow, you're a knockout." And I'm just like, is that the language you want to use with your daughter, Jim? I mean, I understand wanting to compliment her, but you sound a little too excited there.
Yeah, yeah, but overall, yeah, totally agree that it was good to see that relationship kind of develop a bit, and yeah, as you say, to see Barbara kind of in the driver's seat of that relationship as well, and Dick as Robin, normally quite self-assured, kind of confident, and become that kind of slightly bumbling, like falling for her little kind of jokes and things. Yeah, it was nice. It just adds a little bit more depth and richness to the characters, I think.
On that, I was kind of divided on that because at one point, I was arguing against myself in it because I also like the fact that Dick is very confident and self-assured, and anybody who's read the comics know that he's a complete ladies' man in the comics as well. Um, so part of me is like, I mean, Dick should be more confident than this, but another part of me was like, well, actually, that does work because that just shows like what effect Barbara has on him, that
Yeah.
she's able to bring out his insecure side like that. So I argue against myself in that. So I and I'm not sure where I land on it ultimately. Um, but also the line from I like this line too. I don't know why this line stood out to me, but when Alfred drops them off and he had just picked them up from after they've been fighting crime, and he got their tuxes ready and everything, and then he picks them up, he drops them off, and then Dick's like, Alfred, I don't know what you'd do without you. And then Alfred just the only the way Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. could have delivered those lines, just like the total catty bitch Alfred. He's like, frankly, neither do I.
Yeah, yeah, I did chuckle at that. Um, I like that. I like it when Alfred's got a bit of sass.
Mhm. Have you seen the Harley Quinn animated series?
Only the first season. I am way behind on it. I did really enjoy the first season, but um, yeah, haven't caught up on the rest.
keep watching. I think it might be season 4 is when Alfred is in there and is just, you know, peak sass in that.
Excellent.
Including his bitch method for dealing with stuff, which I'll let you get to when you get there. Um, but also, and one of the things I like too about this is, and it should not be such a standout, but so many of the live action Batman stuff has shied away from it, that I like the fact that we see Batman doing detective work in this movie.
That literally the next note that I have in my list I was going to mention. Yeah, I hate that detective. He's the Dark Knight detective. I found that the Robert Pattinson live action film, I think, is probably the one that's done the detective work the best in live action. But I loved the fact that they're listening to this audio and he's trying to figure out where things are, and he's like, oh, I recognize that noise. It's not the sea, it's not this river, it must be a shipping lane. And then he pulls out some maps and he starts to find stuff, and I think, oh, that's great. That's what Batman should be, is that proper detective style. And it's not just about swooping in and punching and kicking, but it's about showing his intellect as well as his physical prowess.
Yeah, the way they handle the detective stuff in live action is always interesting because they dance around it a lot. Like the Burton Batman, there's some scenes where they hint at it a lot, like, but it's like it all happens off screen.
Yeah.
So we see like we see like the beginnings of him starting an investigation. We see like the end of it, but we never see the nuts and bolts of it. And The Dark Knight, they kind of hinted at it a few times, but and they had the weird forensics thing, which to this day I do not understand how the hell that was supposed to work. Um, and then the Pattinson movie, yeah, well then we had Batman v Superman where it's just Lois is the best
Yeah.
detective in that movie, which is ridiculous because she's not really much of a detective because Lex Luthor signed the fucking bullets literally, and Batman couldn't figure that out, so that one drove me nuts. Um, and then the Pattinson one, yeah, but then we get to the whole Spanish thing, like I can't remember what it was, but when that scene when Penguin calls them both out and he's like, "Did you guys take high school Spanish?" And I'm just like, he's got a point there.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. It's not a great endorsement when the best example of something still isn't great.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what anything else that kind of jumped out at you about this movie?
Um, I think, I mean, for me, because I haven't what when I the last time I've watched any of really the animated series or any of the animated films, other than Mask of the Phantasm, I've watched more recently, but most of the animated films and stuff, it's been a while since I've watched them. And I forgot how much Kevin Conroy is Batman. Like, he's just, I forgot like how much of a powerhouse he is and how great he is. And I think people often talk about like the most iconic versions of characters, and um, I think a lot of the times animated characters, animated depictions are kind of written off, and it's gratifying that doesn't happen with Batman, and that Kevin Conroy is generally up there with the best Batman of all time, because he's phenomenal. And yeah, I forgot how much I missed hearing his voice as Batman, and it made me like, right, I'm gonna go and rewatch more.
Right? Yeah, that always stands out to me too. Just yeah, I mean that's the voice. It's not often that I hear. I know a lot of people. In fact, I had literally just seen a thread about this on Reddit. I think it was yesterday, where people were asking, like, well, when you're reading the comics, like, which voice do you hear in your head? And for the most part, I don't. Like it. I don't really hear any voices when I'm reading any particular comic characters. Um, the exceptions are Patrick Stewart as Professor X, uh, Mark Hamill as the Joker. Well, some Jokers. There's some depictions that feel like they're not quite like Hamill's depiction. Then those ones don't really. I don't hear his voice. And then obviously, and then it's always Kevin Conroy as Batman. That is like the quintessential voice for the character I hear every single time I read a Batman comic book without even trying. Other times I have to try if I want to think about it. Like, oh, I think with this, I'm hearing Spider-Man 94 if I really want to
Yeah.
sound it out. But or like here, I think I hear Cal Dodd as Wolverine. But with Batman, it is always unintentional, and it's just immediately my mind goes to Kevin Conroy's voice.
Hmm. Yeah. It's just iconic.
Yeah.
And yeah, it for me that was just it was really nice to revisit that.
Yeah,
Um,
and unfortunately, this is the only way we can revisit is going back to these films and these TV shows since unfortunately he passed away a few years ago now.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think yeah, it's the fact that these things are still readily available, I think is great. To not lose that legacy that he's created, because it is it's a prolific legacy across
Mm.
TV, movies, video games. He's done it all, even live action.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also, I don't want to undercut Michael Ansara, who does Mr. Freeze as well. Like he also
Yes.
does he does some really interesting things with his voice depending on which mode Freeze is in. Like
Mm.
when he's the softer, more human version of Freeze, he speaks in more of a normal tone of voice. But when he becomes much more hardened, he's just more focused on the the Mr. Freeze aspect of it. He becomes like almost robotic, and he does some really interesting things with his voice in those performances.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. I really did like that, and actually, this is one of the rare um animated films where I don't think there was any jarring voice acting in it. I think it all felt good. Quite often there's like one voice, you're like, oh, it's not quite right, it doesn't quite fit the character, it doesn't, or they're not intoning it in a kind
Mhm.
of natural way or whatever. But I thought everyone was pretty on point in this film, um, which was nice. It didn't bring me out at any point, which I
I,
find sometimes bad voice acting does.
I mean, I think a big part of that was because this is pretty much, with the exception of Mary Kay Bergman, I think all the actors who are playing the recurring characters from Batman the Animated Series are the same ones who did them in the show itself. So we didn't
Yeah.
have, so they are all very familiar with these characters. They've gotten time to grow into these roles. So I think that's a big part of that as well. But even still, like I said, like we were saying, Bergman doesn't stand out at all in a not in a bad way anyway. Like she fits in very well, and like I said, wasn't aware that it was a different actress in these three different versions of her. So she definitely fits right into the. I mean, if anything, she comes off as more confident, I think, than she did.
Mm.
Whereas she was more youthfully exuberant in Batman the Animated Series, and this like more hyper confident one, it really kind of works because it sets up kind of a nice little character arc, because here she's hyper confident but then at the beginning, but then she gets kind of knocked down by getting kidnapped by Freeze, and then we see her become, somewhere between those two in the new Batman adventures. So it does form a kind of nice little arc for her character in that way.
Yeah. Um, the other thing that really stood out for me in this movie is just the overall plot. Um, I described it to my wife, and I let her read the synopsis, and she was like, "That's an animated show for kids." It's like, yeah, kidnap this woman, they're gonna steal her organs and use it to revive Mr. Freeze's wife, and they're like, it's like, yeah, that's quite a heavy thing for kids. And I mean, I know that I don't think Batman animated series and stuff it's never shied away from kind of being a more adult focused cartoon, while also being for kids. But I appreciated that it was kind of like it's not dumbed down,
That
and I like that.
Yeah, we had talked about this when we talked about the first season of Gargoyles not too far back, and just how groundbreaking that series was in so many ways, because it was doing things like directly addressing the concept of death. Whereas
Yeah,
in shows up until that, they couldn't use the word die or death or anything like that. Like my favorite example was in the Spider-Man animated series from the 90s. They It was never the criminal who shot Uncle Ben or the criminal who killed Uncle Ben. It was always the criminal who got Uncle Ben.
yeah,
And they couldn't even use the Sinister Six. They had to call it the Insidious Six, which again, and I'd said this before, they had Mr. Sinister on X-Men at the same time, so I don't know why when you're applying the name to a group, suddenly it becomes verboten. But another thing too is that Batman the Animated Series, it was really groundbreaking in a lot of ways because they did have like actual guns that the criminals were using. They just couldn't show that they just couldn't hit anything. The bullets couldn't be shown to be
Yeah.
striking anything directly. And there's one episode when Gordon gets shot, but you only see the aftermath, right? Like you hear the gun go off and you see him lying on the ground, but you never see him actually get shot. So that was kind of like the way they got around that. Whereas Gargoyles came right out and addressed those stuff full on. And this and even but even still, even with the restrictions that Batman the Animated Series did have, they were able to make it very all ages. Like I'm not going to say very adult,
Yeah.
but very much appeal to adults as well. I mean, I watch those episodes still now, like I mentioned at the top of the show, and they still hold up. Whereas if I watch, and as much as I loved X-Men 92, and I think X-Men 97 is obviously is a far superior product. And when I go back and I rewatch X-Men 92, the flaws become very obvious. And like the
Yeah.
you can see the places where they thought we have to pull back on this because of the kids. Whereas I never really feel that with Batman the Animated Series unless I'm really trying to think of something. Um, and yeah, it doesn't go to the depths that the extent that Return of the Joker would go, which is why that movie was initially edited to shit. Um, but yeah, when I hadn't thought about that, but I think your wife is right. That is some pretty heavy stuff for an animated production that is ostensibly aimed at kids and would have had a G rating, I believe, at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. You were talking about Spider-Man there, and it always makes me think of Morbius in that, where he's after plasma, not blood, and he has to take it through his hands instead of his
Yes,
his fangs.
which
So,
I still maintain is actually far creepier than a vampire biting someone's neck. Like
yeah, I mean,
those weird little hands, I think those are far creepier than all that other stuff.
but yeah, I totally get it. I totally get where you're coming from there, and yeah, it is. It's that kind of that rare thing that doesn't treat kids as idiots. It's
Mhm.
like kids can handle kind of bigger concepts if you just kind of um give them the information that they need to do that. And I think this film does that. I think it communicates that kind of bigger thing. Like I'm sure when I first watched this, I'd have been like, "What's a blood type?" But
Mhm.
you know, but it wouldn't have stopped my enjoyment of the film.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as an
No.
adult, I'm kind of like, oh, it's really interesting the way that they're doing this, and like, yeah. Um, so yeah, it definitely has that kind of multi-layered approach that I think is, yeah, can be missing from similar products of that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I think that's all I have to say about it. This isn't a long movie, right? It's only like just a little over an hour. So there's not a whole
Yeah.
lot to dig into here. So I don't have a whole lot more to say unless there's anything else you wanted to mention.
No, we've pretty much covered everything that I've got notes on. Other than I think this I read somewhere online that this kind of had some early uses of CGI in kind of cell animation, and I wouldn't say that it didn't stand out to me in the same way that it does in something like Spider-Man, where it's
Oh God,
obvious
it's
when they switch to
terrible.
CGI.
Yeah.
But in this, I think they kind of used it more in terms of like fluidity of motion, and I think I saw somewhere that it was like when the obviously there's that scene where the Batwing is kind of flying out the Batcave, and you can kind of tell there's probably a bit of CGI in there to help with motion and stuff. But I thought it was kind of integrated into the cell animation really well compared to again some of the other series and films of its time. And it didn't stand out. It just kind of enhanced the way that the animation was used. So I just thought that was kind of worth noting. Just from a kind of a technical standpoint. But
Yeah, I felt the same thing. Like it yeah, so they had wanted to do it in actually in the Batman the Animated Series, but they did use some of it in Mask of the Phantasm. And then the use of the CG in there, he's Boyd Kirkland, who directed it, he said it helped elevate it visually beyond normal TV stuff. So they were able to have a little bit more excitement. The vehicles were more consistent and solid looking as well because of that. So in those ways, yeah, I think it definitely it works pretty seamlessly with this.
Yeah.
Um, let's see, I was going to mention something else. Oh, there's also supposed to be another film that was going to come out after this, which would have been called Batman Arkham, and it would have had um the the same actors coming back plus Boyd Kirkland, and then it would have involved Batman and Robin fighting Arkham Asylum escapees, and then they canceled that in favor of Return of the Joker instead, which I don't know. It might have been interesting to see what they would have done with an Arkham movie, and especially if they would have like taken influence from like the Grant Morrison series or something like that in some small way. I mean, obviously it would have to be very small way based on that content, but yeah, it would have been interesting to see what they had planned for that beyond just Batman and Robin teaming, going after Arkham escapees.
Yeah, and it also makes you wonder that if that had happened, would like the Batman Arkham games have come out? Um, because that, quite a similar plot, and you kind of wonder then, that might have changed the shape. Now I'm not much of a gamer myself, but I know that those games are kind of beloved
Very good,
by
yeah.
a lot of Batman fans. So yeah, it would have been. I would like to have seen that film for
Hmm.
sure. But yeah, it makes you wonder if that would have changed kind of the shape of kind of other Batman media going forward as well.
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so I think that's all we have to say about Batman Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero. So Ian, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Absolutely, you can find me on Blue Sky, um, which I'm gonna have to look up my my username because it's got that really long. So I'm Ian-Smith.bsky.social. And you can find me on Instagram at Ian Listens. For my writing, you can look me up, Eoin Smith on Goodreads. Everything else is in my link tree, which I'm sure Perry will put in the show notes.
Absolutely, yes. I was just gonna say we will have that stuff in the show notes, so you can check it out there. As for us, superherocinephiles.com is the website, and we are superherocinephiles.com on Blue Sky and Super Cinema Pod on pretty much all other socials except for X or Shitter or Twitter or whatever they're calling it these days. So um and that does it for this episode. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Superhero Cinephiles is produced by me, Percival Constantine. The show is created by myself and the late great Derek Ferguson, our host emeritus. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com to listen to past episodes or find out how you can be a guest yourself. Support the show by visiting our advertiser links or click the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website to make a one-time donation. We are Super Cinema Pod on both Instagram and Blue Sky, so please be sure to follow us. We'd also appreciate if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and share us with your friends.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.